because at first I had reservations about him. He scored a lot of goals, which
Richarlison.
shoots down my argument. But he's just, for me, he's just started being more of a team player.
Yeah, this is
Which,
Richarlison. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
He's a hell of a talent. He's still young. I personally, touch wood, I hope not, but I think he's destined to go to Barcelona or somewhere like that. You're like
yeah,
one of your continental clubs that have got a history of
yeah.
having great Brazilian players. He's still really
How old
young,
is he? How old is he?
23, 24.
No. Oh wow, I didn't know. So I've got to change my opinion a little bit. I thought he was a lot older than that.
No, not at all.
So he's, oh,
And you look at Calvert-Lewin as well, who's been
yeah,
playing up front as well.
yeah,
It's been great to see him. He's like burst on the scene, hasn't he, this season with the goals
yeah.
he's been scoring?
He's had a good season. He's had a good season.
Yeah,
Uh, so
yeah.
um,
I've you know what? We've been having such a good conversation. I decided to click record, but I'll formally introduce the podcast guest for today. Um, one of the regular guests on my podcast, Paul Fletcher, has told me multiple times about how tight knit and together Burnley's 1970s team was and continues to be even today. So it's my pleasure to have this conversation with the captain of that side, Colin Waldron. Colin also played for Bury, Chelsea, Manchester United, and Sunderland, and went on to enjoy a couple of seasons in the United States, which I'm really looking forward to hearing about, before finishing his playing career with Rochdale. Colin, we've been talking now for about 10 minutes, having a great conversation about
yeah,
football today. But in regard to yourself, that's one hell of a career. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today. How are things with you?
good. Um, I mean, obviously for obvious reasons, it's so far back now. It's decades ago, and I meet up with the lads, but we tend to now and then little stories come back, and we have a good laugh. But when I look back at when you're making me look back at my career, it's something I give very little thought to ever. Um, but 9 clubs, I don't know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, but I always think when I used to see other players that have had so many clubs, I thought there must have been something wrong with them.
Mm.
But I didn't. I just hope that wasn't the case with me.
Well, I think you make a point there in that when people see a footballer with a long CV, if you like, of clubs, and they,
Yeah,
played a lot of different clubs, they often think journeyman, where
yeah,
a couple of
yeah. And
appeal.
I don't want to be called a
No,
journeyman player.
I was gonna say, Colin, I think you're widely regarded as a Burnley legend. If I'm correct in saying, you won a Division Two championship and
Yeah,
a charity shield as well,
yeah,
for
yeah,
Burnley, which is really good going, I would say. And just to get the ball rolling, two quick questions before getting on to you and your own story. I always enjoy hearing from ex-pros who the best player was that they played with and the best player that they played against. Now, I asked Paul this, really interesting answers, and he said the best player that he played with was Roger Hunt when Roger Hunt went to Bolton, and
right.
the best player he played against was Georgie Best. So I was wondering, because of reading up on your time in America, you played against some absolute icons. So I was wondering for yourself, who's the best player that you played with and the best player you played against?
For me, the best player I've played against is the best player that's ever lived. And okay, I played against Pele and Beckenbauer and Cruyff, who were unbelievable players. But the best player that's ever lived was George Best,
Really?
and by a country mile.
So above Lionel Messi, Pele,
Yeah,
Maradona. Yeah.
yeah. You can, don't get me wrong. You can nitpick. If you look at Messi, can't head a ball. He's not big enough. No right foot. Can't tackle. Now, okay, he might not need to do any of those things. But George Best, to this day, nobody knows whether he was left-footed or right-footed. He was brilliant with both. He was a great tackler. He was a great header of a ball. scored goals, created goals, unbelievable. Now, don't get me wrong, some of the other players I've mentioned were unbelievable, but I don't think anybody had the effect on a team. I know Messi has an effect, but Best was something else.
So similar to Paul, you'd say George Best.
He said Best, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't know he thought that, but for me it was a no-brainer. And on top of that, lovely lad.
Yeah.
If you bumped into him in a bar, absolute diamond.
Yeah.
That's nothing to do with being a player, but it helps his reputation.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Best I played with would probably be in the short stay I had at Chelsea. It was littered with players: Charlie Cook, Peter Bonetti in goal, but the standout player for me was Peter Osgood. Again, lovely lad, but a player and a half. One thing stopped him being an absolute blinding player was a little bit of lack of pace, but his control and his vision is absolutely superb.
That's really interesting to hear.
Yeah. Well, different people have different ideas, but because I played with him at Chelsea, and then we played against him, and we played. A little story for you. We played at home against Chelsea not many months after I'd been transferred, and we had a centre half who played alongside me called Colin Blant. And Blanty is one of those players you would not want to go against. You would not want to go anywhere near him. And Osgood made the mistake of hitting him with a bad tackle. And Blanty went off, and there were no subs in those days. And Ozzy comes to me because we were pals from Chelsea, and he's mouthing, really cock of the park there. And he's really full of it. And 5 minutes later, there's a great big cheer, and Blanty comes back down the tunnel. And I've looked at Ozzy and I said, Ozzy, you're in trouble, son. Osgood, but there's at least the second half and part of the first half left. Ozzy went and played left back. Wouldn't come up anywhere near. I think we ended up winning 2 or 3-0. But Ozzy was a good player, best I'd played against, I thought.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think one of the particular reasons why I was really looking forward to speaking to you was that my granddad, who I was really close with, he was a centre half as well.
Where are you going with this one?
What was? Oh, I know. But he was the centre half as well, and he played in around the 1950s, 1960s, and he made it to Everton's B team. He brought me up to be a centre half as well when I played, and taught me the fundamentals like don't play the ball across the face of your goal. No funny business. If it needs putting out, fucking put it out. Don't mess about. And he also gave me the self-confidence, I would say, to every team that I went into. I wanted to be the captain. I just sort of had that about me of wanting to display leadership abilities and be a leader, so to speak. So I think, again, it's one of the reasons why I'm really looking forward to speaking to you. What would you say some of your best qualities were as a player?
As a player, obviously at centre half, you number one is you've got to be a good header of the ball, and you've got to have the ability to tackle. We had a good at Burnley where I picked up loads of good advice. You don't start tackling people in the penalty box. We very rarely give penalties away. And when I was a kid at Bury, I'm not sure I should go down this line, but when I was a kid at Bury, I was playing centre half and going up from the B team to the A team to the reserves to the first team. And I got into the first team and realised that at this level there was an awful lot of I've got to word this. There was an awful lot of unbelievably hard play going on, and I wasn't that kind of player. But within 2 or 3 games, I became that kind of player, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have survived.
Yeah.
And people don't realise that in those days, the 60s, 70s particularly, the on-field filth that went on was frightening.
Yeah. Like you had to be able to defend yourself.
You bloody well had to. And when you were playing Leeds, I mean, I always make the case that when we played, we had 2 or 3 players at the back that could handle themselves and be the kind of player that the hardness that you needed. And most teams had 2 or 3. Leeds had 8.
Yeah. Paul told me about this. Don Revy's side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's something else. You've just brought something back, and it was in the paper about 12 months ago. They took a current referee. I think it might be the BBC. They took a referee and they said, "We're going to show you a game from the 70s, and we want you to tell us what you think." And they sat him in a studio on his own and showed him, I think it was the Leeds Chelsea, it might have been the semi-final, I don't know, but certainly Leeds were one of the teams. And he wrote all the notes, and they came back and said, "Right, we've just got 2 questions for you. If you'd have refereed that game, how many yellows, how many reds?" He said, "If I'd refereed that game, there'd have been 20 yellows, 12 reds." So they said, "Right." So he said, "Just one sec. How many were there?" He said, "1 yellow."
Wow.
Now that says it all. Because nowadays it's for quite rightly, it's not like that anymore. It couldn't go on like that.
Do you think it's too soft today, though? Do you think they?
I don't think it's too. I don't think it's too soft, because here's something that I still watch the television,
Yeah.
and I'm still astounded that they've got these cameras now. They've got the camera, and they'll go to VAR. And for me, I don't mind VAR, because with VAR has to be the truth. And VAR will have 4 or 5 different angles, and they still get it wrong. How can that happen? That's my big thing. But going back to when we played, the referees, and it's the same today. The referees today, and particularly then, they know all the rules of football. They have to. Footballers don't. None of us knew any. You knew what a foul was, but we would know 50% of the rules, because it never bothered us. We just took what the referee said. But a referee has to know all the rules. So when a referee goes on the pitch, he's educated, we aren't. On the other side, when the referee goes on the field, he doesn't know what goes on the park, and we do. And that's that. The 2 things collide, because I don't think referees, I don't think they can or they couldn't believe what was going on. Nowadays it's far more acceptable. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything stupid going on, but now and then you see one wild one, but very rarely.
Yeah. I'm trying to cast my mind back. Paul mentioned the name of a certain Leeds centre half. I believe it was Norman Hunter. Correct me if I've got that wrong. Did you have any? I've heard he was a tough nut to crack.
Well, we picked Norman Hunter because he hit one of our best players.
Frank Casper.
Yeah, and it was a defining tackle because it was the week before we played the semi-final, and Frank was an absolute top-notch player for us. We couldn't. He played. He should never have played, but he played, and it took him months to get over it. But the Leeds had players in every, like I said to you, 8 players that had snapped you in half. Hunter was one of them, but I think we pick on Hunter because how he hit Casp.
Okay, that's understandable. On a different note, like it's really interesting to hear like the changes in the game that you're going on about, especially from like a refereeing perspective, as opposed to how the players perceive and understand the games. Out of curiosity, did you have any superstitions when you played, or did you have to be a particular number? Like my granddad was a number 5. I was a number 5. I always made sure I played. I was number 5.
Well, let me join the club. I mean, they put me in number 6 once. I said, I'm not wearing it. They said, well, it's in the programme. I said, if that happens again, I don't go out. So I wore number 5. A lot of players had superstitions. I used to take a gold necklace thing I had on with an old coin, and I had to take that off last and hang it on me hook. Little things like that. Everybody has them.
Yeah.
Some people. One guy I knew, he had to put his boot on first, on the left foot first. Daft, but if it works for him, it works.
No, of course. Still rings true today. A lot of players today, I feel, still have superstitions. Now, you mentioned earlier about being a young lad coming through at Bury, right? And correct me if I'm wrong here, but when I was doing some reading up, obviously as a podcast host, I think you've got to be, well researched before you go into any podcast. I'm led to believe you were born in Bristol, so I'm curious, how does a Bristol lad end up playing for Bury rather than going through at one of the Bristol clubs?
I lived a lot of my life in Oldham, from being something like 3 months old. And my dad was in the army, the Royal Marines, just come out of the war. And my mum lived in Bristol, and he was stationed. Sorry, she was from Oldham. My dad was from Bristol, and he's stationed up here. They got together, got married, went down to Bristol. I was born. They came straight back up to Oldham and lived there after that.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. How was it coming through at Bury at the time? I mean, it's a real shame to see what they've gone through as a club. Obviously now they've
always watch the results, but they're a very, very small club, and they're like 7 or 8 miles from Bolton, which is a big population. They're 7 or 8 miles from Manchester, which doesn't need any explanation. So the crowds are always small. But they did all right in that particular time. They're in the 2nd division. We're doing okay. And I was brought through from like the B team, the A team reserves, and then into the first team. And luckily, on my debut, it was at Blackburn. It was a local derby, and I was fortunate to have a good game. And the next game was against Bolton. And I was playing against a lad called Wyn Davis, who was a 6'2" centre forward, great in the air. And again, I was fortunate enough to have a good game. So the first 2 matches I had against top players, against top clubs, local clubs, big crowds, I just rode my luck. And after that, I got established. And I only played 20 games, and I'm off to Chelsea.
Yeah. When I last spoke to Paul, I can't believe he didn't tell me sooner, but he told me a story that when he come through at Bolton, one day he was told, right, jump in the car, you're being sold. And he didn't have a clue where he was going to. He didn't know what team. And it turns out, and this is why I can't believe he hadn't told me up until the other week, that it was Harry Catterick's Everton that were interested in signing him. Yeah, and apparently Everton were a bit scared about losing Joe Royle. Apparently Joe Royle was a really hot prospect coming through at the time as a young lad. So they had their eye on Paul as a potential replacement. And for medical reasons, Paul ended up failing just the move fell through for medical purposes. So I'm wondering from your experience, obviously then you moved down to Chelsea. Did that move, obviously it's big for you, you're still a young lad, did it have that element of mystery around it?
Do you know anything about me move?
Not too much. I've read a little bit about it, but that's for you to tell me.
Bury needed 30 grand, and they offered me for sale, and in comes one club, Liverpool, Bill Shankly, and I'm told to come get dressed the following day, smart collar and tie, come and meet Shanks. You're going to go to Liverpool. I get 2 phone calls when I'm at home, and one is to say don't sign because there's another club in for you. See what they've got to offer, and you can compare the two. The third call was from Joe Mercer, who was manager of Man City, and I only knew him from listening to him on the radio and the TV, and I thought a lot about him, and I'd love to sign for him. And he said, Carl, he said, I'm just ringing up to let you know that we can't sign you because we want to offer a player and some money, but Bury need the money. And just have a great career, son. Whatever you do, don't get caught between 2 stools. So he must have known the 2 clubs that were involved. I didn't. Then the following day, I meet Shanks. Me, him in a room with him and 2 of his. One was the secretary, forgotten his name, and another director. And he starts, do you smoke? Do you drink? Do you have sex? Do you do? And he fired and absolutely crap myself. And sat there. And I mean, I frightened me to death. And I've been told not to sign for him. And I thought, well, that doesn't need much doing. And at the end, he's just sign here, son. And I had to say, I want to go and speak to my mum and dad.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to go and speak to my mum and dad. And he said, right, we'll come down to your house. So I drove back to Oldham to say, Dad, Shanks is coming. I can't sign for him. I've got to see this other club. Tell him we'll come to Anfield the following day, but I can't talk to him. I'm frightened to death. Shanks came. My dad did what he had to do, and Shanks left. Get a phone call. You're coming to the airport tomorrow morning. You're going to meet somebody. Went to the airport, got driven there. In walks Tommy Docherty, manager of Chelsea, all on his own, and says, Colin said, I believe you've been meeting Shanks. And I said, yeah. He said, how much has he offered you? I said, he's offered me £50 a week. 1967, good little wage that. I said, but I'm in the reserves for 2 years, while they bring me on. And I said, that's no problem. He said, well, I'll give you £60 a week. And my team is Osgood, Benetti, Charlie Cook, Eddie McCready, Colin Waldron. And I said, okay, so I signed there and then.
Yeah.
And he said, and him and Shanks were quite close, even though it was a rivalry. And he said, you've got to ring Shanks and tell him you're not going to Liverpool. And I rang Shanks, and am I allowed to swear?
Of course you are.
I rang Shanks, and he came on the phone. I said, I can quote you verbatim because I can never forget the words. Mr. Shankly, it's Colin Waldron. I've signed for Chelsea. A deathly hush, and then the whole fucking deal stinks, son. and you never could fucking play, and hung up.
Cheeky bastard.
And well, it didn't bother me because I'd been in this telephone box in Manchester Airport, absolutely crapping myself. I was just thankful to get out. Years go by, and I've established myself. Come to Burnley, I established myself as a decent player, playing okay. We go to Liverpool and win 1-0, which you never do, not in those days. But night game, and I'm last one out of the dressing room, and there's a bit of a long corridor. And as I'm just starting to walk down this corridor at the other end, Shanks is holding a press conference. And just as I start walking towards because that's where the bar was, or where they drink afterwards, the press conference goes, and he's walking. There's me and him walking towards each other. And to be fair to him, as he gets to me, he puts his hand on my chest. He's only about 5'8", 5'7", and he goes, "I always knew you'd be a good one." Walked on.
Oh, okay.
For a month, I was 10 foot tall.
Oh, okay. No, I retract my statement then. He wasn't a cheeky bastard. At least he always thought highly of you.
No, well, I mean, but that was Shanks to a T.
Yeah.
He was so fired up. But I just thought he made Liverpool what they are. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Certainly had a lasting impact. And just interestingly, from on that Chelsea move, how old were you around the time of that Chelsea move?
I just turned 19.
Oh, that's so young.
It is, particularly when I'd played 21 games, still on a learning curve, and always lived at home with mum and dad. Now I was going down to London, live in digs, and the other thing it was that, and it took me a few years to realise that I'd walked into a horrible dressing room, because I went to the dressing room, it had all these stars. I mean, it was just incredible. Who's who, and I'm playing with them. And I start off okay, but then my game goes, and I was desperate to be dropped. I wanted to be dropped. And Doherty kept playing me. The crowd were having a dig at me. And eventually, I only played 9 games, and I got dropped. But what I didn't realise was that the dressing room was toxic, and all these were senior players. Benetti had his own group. Ron Harris had his own group. Eddie McCreed had his own group, and I didn't realise because I hardly ever spoke to anybody. And here's the classic about I only spent 3 or 4 months down there because I signed in June, started in August. In October, I've been transferred back to Burnley, up to Burnley. And I lived in my mid-digs. I never went out. Nobody invited me out. Most of them live down in Brighton. I'm living 15 minutes away from the ground. And one night, for some reason, I get invited to a party. And I'd never been out for months. And I thought, I'll go. And I go to this party, and it's in a semi-detached house. Lots of people in, packed. And at that particular time, the lad that I'd replaced or jumped over going into the team at Burnley was a lad called Jimmy Thompson, who is now at Burnley, was at Burnley within a year of me signing for him. But he was in the reserves as a centre-half at Chelsea.
Okay. And
I this time he put me in. Jimmy Thompson was 6 foot, fair-haired Scottish lad. And I still see him to this day as part of the group. Anyway, so I go to this party, and I'm having a bad time at the team. The team are doing badly. And I've been there 10 minutes, and I don't know a soul. And this lad comes up, maybe early 20s, and he says, "Jimmy, how are you?" And I thought, he thinks I'm Jimmy Thompson. He says, "Jimmy, I've got to ask you." He said, "What about that fucking Colin Waldron? Does he stink?" And I'm thinking, right, yeah. I said, "See ya." So I'm out the door and gone. So my only night out when I was in Chelsea, that was it.
Fucking hell.
And to be honest, I didn't blame him because I wasn't playing well. But I blame myself for everything. But it was only 2 or 3 years later when I spoke to other people who said, well, okay, you might have been not doing well, but it wasn't your fault. You weren't doing that badly. It's just all the players around you, the dressing room atmosphere. And I'm thinking, wow. And I was too young to realise what was going on. But I didn't know anybody hardly. And I never, ever, ever went for a drink with a player. But the Jimmy Thompson thing just summed it all up.
Well, it's great that those years later you were able to put your finger on it and realise, that's why I wasn't able to adapt. And just, I guess, a follow-up question from that was, it's probably my own ignorance for not knowing, but was that Chelsea side very ever successful?
Well, they'd been successful. From memory, I think the season prior to me going there, they'd got beat in the final. And I'm not sure whether was it season I left they got to the final. I think they got to the final twice, lost one and won one. And I can't. You better check that.
Okay.
I was there night 67, 68. Sorry, 67, 3 months.
Okay.
But the only player I had any contact with was Peter Osgood, who I thought was a great lad.
Yeah.
But I was so thankful to come back, get back home, and what summed it all up for me, what just got me confidence back, if you like, was that I was still playing in the same league with Burnley as I was with Chelsea, the first division. And as soon as I came to Burnley, I was playing well, I was fine.
Yeah, so it wasn't you.
So I wasn't as to blame as much as I thought.
Okay.
So that opened my eyes a little bit.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that, I mean, a couple of finals, but that may be part of the reason why that Chelsea side wasn't so successful at that toxic team environment when you've got little cliques in the dressing room. Without that sort of team cohesion, if you like.
I think that the manager was Tommy Docherty, obviously, and the day I left in October, I signed in June. I left in October. The day I left, that was the day he got sacked. That day, and I remained a friend of Tommy Docherty right through until he passed away 6 months ago. And the main reason for that was I came to Burnley, and his son was at Burnley, Mick Dock, and became a great friend of Mick's. So then I started seeing Tommy Dock again. And Tommy Dock was a complete character all on his own. And love the guy to bits.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that you've managed, that you're able to have that sort of relationship with the manager in particular. And am I right in saying that you signed for Burnley under a different manager than Jimmy Adamson?
Yeah, I signed under a manager called Harry Potts.
Right. Because
but it was Harry and Jimmy that came and interviewed me, and it was Jimmy that got me to sign the contract. Now that didn't make any difference because I didn't know either of them. I just thought that was it. When I started training with Burnley, it became clear that obviously Potts, who was the manager, he might be down at training once or twice a week. Adamson was the coach, and his coaching methods were unbelievably good. I mean, even as an immature player growing up, eye-opening.
Yeah.
That followed us right through to, because when he became manager, his soccer nous then showed through. But it was Adamson that brought us all us lot on.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about his coaching methods and his ability to coach, because Paul speaks very highly of him. But when I spoke to Paul about Adamson, Paul mentioned his man management abilities and his ability to motivate you to go out and perform. So I was wondering, for you as captain, that relationship's got to be different to the rest of the team, I would say.
It has and it hasn't. It's a difficult one because Paul and I were very, very close, along with 4 or 5 of the players. I mean, of the team, there's about 7, and we meet up on a regular basis. And one of the things that we never agree on is Adamson. Because Paul is an out-and-out devoted fan, and I was, but as all these players I'm talking about now, Casper, Thompson, Doherty, Nolte, people that, as they tell their stories with Adamson, I'm thinking, well, I thought he was a coach second to none, the greatest coach I've ever been with. His managerial skills, for me, over the years, I've just changed the way I'm not as confident that I think he could have done better. Whereas Fletch thinks he's the bee's knees. But it's just an opinion.
Yeah.
It's different from Fletcher's opinion. But as a coach, unbelievable. Things that he did, and I think, bloody hell, what's he doing? I mean, we played one game at Everton, and you know, when you have a back 4, 2 full backs and 2 centre halves, that's your back 4. We were marking Joe Royal. Now, Joe was a big lad, 6'2", 6'3". I knew Joe quite well. I got on well with him, but obviously good in the air. So what Adamson had us doing, the only time ever in my entire career, that's how your back 4 is. He got the back 2 to go like that. So you had the 2 full backs,
like a sweeper almost.
Well, not so much a sweeper. You had Joe Royal in the middle, me behind Joe Royal between the goals and him, and the other centre half in front of Joe Royal. Right, so you've got 2 full backs, Joe Royal in the middle, me behind him, other centre half in front of him, and we're playing that way. And the other centre half, Jimmy Thompson, needs to know where Joe's going. So Joe would go to the right, and I'm screaming right, left. And we did it in training, and it was fucking useless. And we're thinking, what the bloody hell are we doing here? He never got an header. Joe Royal never got an header. The system worked, and we said, well, hold my hand up, but don't play it again, which we didn't.
Wow.
But that was absolutely mental. How we got away with that, I'll never know.
That's really impressive that you managed to, obviously from what I know, obviously being brought up, told about the team of the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah.
Evertonians think very highly of Joe Royal, rightly considered a legend, and to cut him off like that, that's impressive.
Well, and I mean, if I told it to some pros today, some professionals, they'd laugh at you.
Yeah.
If I told it, it was absolutely crazy, but it worked.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I guess it's always interesting to find out. It's a bit of a selfish question, really, but what did you make of that Everton team and the club, I guess, around the 60s and the 70s?
Well, the strange thing is, everybody has different views and how you view it, and you look at things. I look at our team that we had in the that won the second division championship. I had 2 or 3 great years from then on in the Premiership. And if I'm to analyse that team, as I'm talking to you, Mike, I'm thinking Everton have got a lot. Everton. I'm talking about Everton, but I'm talking about my team. Good goalkeeper. Everton had a good goalkeeper.
Gordon West.
Yeah. 2 fullbacks. The right fullback, a strong tackler, but could go forward. The left fullback was past his sell-by date, but a class act. And he was naturally left-footed. The 2 centre-halves, me and Jimmy Thompson, worked well together. 2 hard centre-halves, good in the air. You look at the Everton back 4, Le Bon.
Yeah.
Who's lad played not Sinclair, played alongside him? Simpson.
Trying to think of his centre-back partner, because I've been brought up.
He played alongside Le Bon and was sensational. The fullbacks, I can't remember the names.
Ray Wilson was the left back.
Ray Wilson, right? And I don't know. Then you go into midfield. Our midfield, a right-sided midfield player called Martin Dobson, bombed through, played for England, bombing forward on the right, scored you 12 goals a season. Our quarterback was a natural left-sided midfield player, Doug Collins. He created for us. In the middle, Jeff Nolte, who became an Everton fan, a player, played right in front of the back 4. He'd go forward, score you 10 goals a season. So the balance, which is a huge thing in soccer, was perfect. Up front, Paul Fletcher, great in the air and brave. Alongside him, Frank Casper, a gazelle with a cannon in both feet. Winger, Leighton James, 2-footed, crossed a great ball, scored goals. So every position in our team, perfect, for great position and perfect for the team. At that time, Everton, just the same. Bally.
Harvey
Who was
Kemble.
the little tough winger he had? Stocky.
Alex Young.
No.
I'm trying to think. Brown.
It might have been Alec Young, but I don't. But I always remember when we played Everton, it was like 2 twins going against each other, and because the balance in our team was outstanding, but the balance in Everton's team was just the same. That's what you've just. When I talk to people like yourself, Mike, it kickstarts my memory going again. It all brings it all back.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear. And I mean, we were speaking a little bit before we started recording. You said you had several good performances against Everton. Was it always a tough game to go? Like, for example, playing at Goodison Park.
We never won 3 or 4. It was always a tough game, and always big crowd, good crowd, and they were always a footballing side. What was the manager called?
Harry Catrick.
That's him. Because he had a long spell, didn't he? I thought he did well for the club.
Yeah.
And I thought Everton were a good footballing side, and a successful side as well.
Yeah, of course. And to turn it back to yourself, obviously you enjoy, like, I think, without sounding too harsh, I think by Burnley's standard, you did enjoy a fair bit of success. You obviously played a pivotal role in that as the captain. To be captain of a side that goes on to win the league, no matter what division, I think that's a tremendous achievement.
Well, Burnley won the league in '63 or something. I don't know, 60. And I hadn't got to the club then, but when I got to the club, '67, it was just so. We got relegated a couple of years later. We had one poor season in the second division, but then we got this side together with the balance and everything. We came up, and the last game of the season we drew at Preston. Then we won the Charity Shield.
Yeah. Which you scored in, by the way.
Yeah. Again, this was Adamson again, because that goal in the Charity Shield was a set piece, and set pieces hadn't been used a lot, but Adamson brought them in. And this little story here for you. This goal I scored against Man City to win the Charity Shield. There was lots of running off the ball, different people. It's a really complex move.
Yeah.
But it ends up with me in an ocean of room heading the ball in from close range. So we scored this goal. We won the Charity Shield, and we're starting life back in the Premiership, the Fifth Division.
Yeah.
And after 13 games, we're doing well. We're about fifth or sixth. The first 7 games, we don't get beat. Anyway, we play Man City at home. And Thursday was always a tactics day at the training ground. And we do the tactics, and then we come to the last session, the free kicks, the set pieces. And Adamson says, right, what about the free kick to Colin? And we all said, you don't do it. They'll read it. We don't do it. To a man, we said, look, forget it. We've got other free kicks. And he said, no, we give it them. So I said, what do you mean you give it them? Well, I mean, we were really getting argumentative with it. He said, hang on. We'll give it them. But when Colin goes in on his run, we'll go like that and send somebody in behind him, 10 yards behind him. So give him the free kick. So we went through the motions of the free kick, where I went on like a dummy run and somebody gave it. Nobody give it anything, any credence whatsoever. We go to Man City, and after half an hour, we get a free kick in the plumb position that's going to be used for this free kick. On the halfway line, Jimmy Thompson's marking Franny Lee. And Franny Lee says, are you using the free kick to Waldron? And Thompson says, well, just watch. I go on my run. Alan Oakes and Mick Doyle pick me up and virtually hold me. And I look behind me, and Paul Fletcher's in an ocean room back of the net.
Nice.
And we didn't jump around because we thought, fucking hell, we were stunned. We're absolutely stunned. But that, Adamson,
nice.
At his best.
Nice. And I had a little look just to, because I wouldn't forgive myself if I got it wrong, but Brian LeBone's centre half partner, Jimmy Gabriel. Forgot. Jimmy Gabriel. Yeah.
He might have been just getting a tad older then. Was he a hard player, Jimmy Gabriel?
I think hard. So.
I think he was one.
From what I know, yeah.
Was he a Scot?
Yep, I think so, because LeBone had a reputation of being an absolute gent. I don't think he ever received the red card.
Well, for me, I don't know how he got through that, but Brian LeBone had this reputation of being a gentleman centre half, and I couldn't believe that he'd had a career like that. And I thought, well, if he had a career like that, a good career, and he hasn't resorted to filth, then he's got to be a player and a half. And he was.
Yeah. He was someone I was brought up to admire greatly, and probably, like, without even seeing him play, I'd say he's my favourite Everton player of all time. I haven't even seen him play, you know.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, that type of gent. Now, talk a little bit about, you mentioned...
Let me interrupt.
Go on.
Was there a winger called Morrissey?
Yeah, I think it was Jimmy or Johnny, one or the other.
Stocky, what about 5'8", 5'9", but stocky, but could play a bit. And that's right, because I think he was part of that team I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Johnny Morris.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Don't worry about it. But you mentioned there just that sort of the tactical wit of Adamson. which obviously like people like yourself are full of praise of. And didn't you link up with him later on in your career, going to Sunderland, I believe, yeah?
Yeah, at Sunderland. Big club, Sunderland.
Yeah, it's a shame to see what they've been through these last couple of years.
Yeah. Oh yeah, unbelievable. I mean, it's just a. Um, I think they got relegated when I joined. Oh no, I joined them as they were about to get relegated. I joined them, but massive crowd, massive support. But Adamson then he made me captain at Sunderland, and things started going wrong for him. And what happened was he got sacked by Burnley and gone to Sunderland. And when I look back, obviously it was a mistake, because at Sunderland, his manager, he employs the assistant manager at Burnley who was with him, the chief scout, the club captain, the club vice captain. I mean, there were other players. There were other office side as well. And as soon as things started going wrong, which they did, the Burnley contingent got the blame. And he had to drop 3 of us because we were ex-Burnley players, even though we weren't playing badly. And once that happened, all 3 of the players left the club in a little bit of on a downer, I think. But Adamson, I'm not going to blame Amor, but how he handled it, I didn't think was good. 3 people who followed him through thick and thin, and we're all leaving the club very quickly. And I think probably because he wanted to get rid. But we'll never know.
That's strange. Well, I guess just from an objective perspective, it's easy to sort of point the finger, isn't it? The 3 Burnley lads, I guess.
Well, I don't think, to be fair, when he told us that he was dropping us, it was blatantly apparent why. And as captain, I spoke for the other 2, whether they liked it or not, and I said, "Boss, we understand why. We'll carry on doing what we can do." But he never played us in the reserves. We didn't play, and results didn't get any better. And all 3 of us left the club halfway through the season. So,
wow. Was Manchester United before or after Sunderland?
Before. When Anderson got sacked at Burnley, they put in charge a guy called Joe Brown. Joe Brown was a born-again Christian, and he preached the Bible to everybody. I mean, preaching the Bible to a professional sports team ain't going to go down well, but he was a really nice fella, mild, totally out of his depth as manager of a football club, and totally under the cosh of the chairman, Bob Lloyd. Bob Lloyd was an out-and-out cunt. When he sacked Adamson at Burnley, and the day they sacked him, Granada Television rang me up, and I knew the Granada people, and they said, "Will you come and do an interview?" I said, "Yeah, I'll come and do an interview." And they knew I was going to slag off the club. And my phone goes, I'm just about to go down Manchester for the interview, and it's Bob Lloyd. And he said, "I understand you're going down to do a TV interview." I said, "Yeah, I am." He knew that I was an Adamson man. And if you're an Adamson man, you were against Bob Lloyd, and he was a dictator like you won't believe. So he's took over. He always had the club anyway, but he sacked his manager, got a puppet in his place, Joe Brown, and rings me up and said, "I'm a bit concerned about what you're going to say in the interview." I said, "Well, to be honest, Mr. Lloyd, I'm not going to say anything like that. I'm going to say I'm not going to put the club in jeopardy." And we hung up. I went down, did an interview, just said, "Look, that's football. That's what happens. It's sad, but we've got to get on with it." Results went from bad to worse. And the 3 players that were at Sunderland, went to Sunderland, we were all Adamson men. 3 blatant Adamson men in the team.
Yeah. Within
3 games, we all got dropped. You're talking the captain, the vice captain, and another player who were all first team regulars, and they all got dropped because the chairman, Bob Lloyd, said get rid of them. So we all got dropped. They carried on losing. They got relegated. But within a month, Adamson had got the Sunderland job, and we all went up to Sunderland. All 3 of us. But it didn't work there either.
That's interesting to hear that. Even now, like obviously with Paul's experience in the commercial side of the game, one of the things he often says about people on the board is that, and like directors and executives, is that they're not football people. Like they don't understand the game. And it's interesting to hear that it was still the case back in the day.
They don't understand the game. If you go on the board of directors, you're there for one reason. Well, no, you might be there for 2 reasons. One is to support your club, and you've probably put some money in. But 2 is ego. It's all about ego and nothing else. And Bob Lloyd at that particular time was skint. He was robbing the club, and within a couple of years he'd gone.
That's interesting. Now, from your perspective as a player, I was really interested to hear, and one of the things that Paul flagged to me when he suggested that I speak to you was the fact that you ran a business alongside the late great Colin Bell, who I've heard a lot of good things about. Now, you look at players, especially today, in the modern game, like it's not uncommon for them to have like external business ventures, whether it be like a clothing brand, something fitness related, or just shares or stakes in a certain company. And I'd be really interested to hear what were
both Colin Bell and I were at Bury as kids.
Right.
He was a couple of years older than me, I think, and he was in the first team, and I was an apprentice. I would be cleaning his boots and whatever. But Colin Bell and Bury were in the 2nd division, and he was streets ahead of anybody. And he signed for Man City. Now, at that particular time, he had an agent, and the agent said, I asked the agent if he'd do me a favour. He said, well, I'll put you under my books. Now, he only had 2 players on his books, me and Colin Bell. So me and Belly, he went to Man City. I came back to Burnley, and we'd bump into each other now and then, but we had the same agent. And when I'd had 2 moves, I'd got $6,000 in the bank in 1967. Belly had something like $5,000. And he said to us, look, you got us together. He said, look, put your money into something, go away and give it 2 or 3 months thought, and come back and let's discuss it. So we went back, and cut a long story short, we thought restaurant. So we owned this restaurant in Whitefield, which is just outside of Bury. And the agent said, look, we're going to call it the Bell Waldron. because I advertised your names, and particularly Belly. And Belly were big time. The name Colin Bell.
Yeah.
And it was a shy introvert, Belly. Unbelievable. Anyway, so we own this restaurant, and we immediately get all Spanish waiters, and instantly it's a success. We've got a great chef, a Spanish chef, the waiters, and every Friday night the agent would be in there looking after it, because me and Belly on a Friday night had to stay at home, obviously. Me and Belly would work a couple of nights each just to make sure that everything was right. And not that we knew anything about the business, but people wanted to see us. But people wanted to see Belly, not me. Didn't bother me one bit. I would go in 2-3 nights a week, and we had a restaurant, a cocktail bar, and a coffee lounge, all on the same level.
Nice.
I think we sat about 70 or 80 customers, and fucking hell, we were busy. And we were busy for two reasons. People came to see Belly, and because the food was good. And it didn't bother me that people wouldn't come and see me. It wouldn't happen. Didn't bother me. The success of the restaurant was all that mattered. And every time I was in, I'd be in the restaurant. I'd go to every table. Everything okay? Do you want it? But I spoke to everybody 2 or 3 times every night I was in. Belly sat downstairs in the office at 6 o'clock, and at 11 o'clock he'd start switching the lights off upstairs, so they had to leave. He couldn't talk to anybody, and I'd say, "What the fuck? What's fucking going on here?" Because it really pissed me off.
Yeah.
But the agent said, "Look, nothing you can do. You're stuck with it."
Yeah.
We had it for 4 years, hugely successful. Belly sold out. No, I sold out first because I was getting married. And I think I got me $6,000 back and another 4. I think I got 10 grand. 2 years later, Belly sold out, got 98 grand.
Fuck.
And the stupid thing was, and I've never understood this, it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me because in that business, I learned a lot. Belly wouldn't learn fuck all. But I learned a lot. And the fact that I'd worked hard and my conscience was clear. Belly on the other, I mean, he didn't work tuppence. But he got his money, and good luck to the lad. Never spoke to him again. We played against each other, and he would shake hands, but he'd be gone. His personality was zero.
That's interesting.
It's just, everybody's different, aren't they? You talk to Paul Fletcher, maybe myself, outgoing.
Yeah.
Belly, unbelievably shy.
Did that come across as rude or just introverted, just shy?
Well, we knew him as a complete introvert.
Yeah.
But in the restaurant, people are saying, "Colin, why does Colin Bell not come up?" I said, "Well, he's a little bit shy and he's not so good." I'd make excuses for him, because if he'd have had a personality, bloody hell, he'd have been Billy big time.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's where his mode of expression comes from. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier about Lionel Messi, not the the most outspoken person. I think it's been great to see him as Messi's got older grow into like leadership qualities. Yeah. He's been a bit more outspoken on issues. But
I saw a clip today of Messi scoring a goal, and he goes berserk. Absolutely. If ever you get a chance, look back on anything to Colin Bell, you'll see him score wonder goals and he turns around, he jogs back like that, totally without emotion.
Wow. But I was going to say,
Unbelievable.
is that where do you think his way of expressing himself was just through his football?
Well, I wouldn't argue with that because he expressed it like nobody else, but um, he just he didn't realise how much he was adored and idolised by people. And even if he did know it, he wouldn't show it and wouldn't want it. His introvert personality was, I've never known anything like it.
Wow.
It was just crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You couldn't talk to people in the restaurant. They'd come to see him. They'd travel miles, but wouldn't come out of the downstairs.
Mad. Mad. He's got a stand named after him now.
Oh no, yes. I mean, to be honest, at Man City, he deserves it. But he hadn't got a bar named after him in the Colin Waldron.
Now, America, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the things that really hurt me about this whole lockdown and pandemic and not being able to travel was um, the the university that Paul is the co-founder of. I've just finished studying there, and I was meant to spend, my final year, graduating the summer of last year, the summer of 2020. I was meant to be going over to the US and working with a club in California. Um,
Wow.
and doing a placement there, which just hasn't come off, obviously, with the pandemic. And I am absolutely fascinated with the way Americans show, like the showmanship of American sport. I think it's absolutely fascinating. Like obviously, you look at basketball, baseball, American football, like that's their bread and butter. They're excellent at it.
Yeah.
Whereas soccer, as I've heard you call it a couple of times as we've been speaking, like it still very much is developing even now. And when
Yeah.
you joined, it wasn't Major League Soccer as we know it now. I think it was called the North American Soccer League or something along that line. And I think you played for three different clubs, if I'm not mistaken, three different cities. So
Yeah.
tell me all about it. How'd you find it?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved America and I loved Americans. The first place I went to was Tulsa in Oklahoma. Great climate. Um, a little bit of a Bible punching area, but that didn't bother me. The people were lovely, warm. One thing about all Americans is if you were to walk along any street in Britain and you're walking along and there's somebody coming towards you, the majority of Brits head down straight past. But in America, hi, how you doing? Complete strangers, and it costs nothing, but for me it meant a lot.
Yeah.
So that was one. Climate was the other. Obviously, we were paid really good money. Soccer had just started, and loads of when we were in Tulsa, you're talking 1977, maybe 78, 79 maybe. And they never heard English people in Oklahoma then. And I'd go into a bar and somebody'd say, "Hey, say that again, man." and just and it, but Tulsa was lovely. Got transferred to Atlanta, up towards New York. That was fabulous. Again, great climate, places to see, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Good money again. And then a third transfer to Philadelphia, which was like Leeds on a wet day, just below New York. But by then, quite a few players had started to come across. In our team, we had Alan Ball and Johnny Giles, both playing. And Johnny Giles, obviously part of the Leeds filth. We never discussed it, but he would wear plimsolls. And even in plimsolls, he'd try and break the legs. And I'm thinking, Johnny, what are you doing? It's unbelievable. And for a small guy, good player, but frightening. Frightening, even with plimsolls on. Bally was Bally couldn't stop playing, and when he played, it had to be 100%, no matter what it was. And I admired that. But he was a player, another top notch. When he was at Everton, he was just something else, wasn't
he? Yeah, sensational.
Yeah, and it showed, where we played. I'd had 3 seasons there, and then I'd had enough. I came back, and I was going to retire. And my best mate, who had over here, a lad called Doug Collins, rang me up, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I've come back. I've finished. I'm done." He said, "Well, I'm manager at Rochdale. Will you join me?" I said, "Rochdale? Fucking..." Anyway, cut long story short, I went to Rochdale, and it was a huge mistake because you had to take your own kit. Right, I ain't got any kit, so they got me some kit. When I came in for the first morning training, I threw all the kit on the floor, which you do at a football club, and it's gathered together, wash, and it's yours the day after. And they said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Oh, you got to wash your own." And I'm thinking, this ain't for me. And the level of football was, because I'd been a player in the higher echelons of football, and I'm down at these guys' level, they won't have